Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session this morning um, on Capital IQ. We want to welcome Michelle Costello, who is given the session to us, and I want to read her bio very quickly. Ms. Costello is a professional educator, business librarian, corporate credit specialist. She brings 14 years of banking experience in real estate, syndicated leverage, and corporate finance to the courses and research she conducts to universities and private clients. Ms. Patel is passionate about information and finance literacy, which is reflected in her research and instruction. She's also an experienced manager who served as a director of a nonprofit microfinance organization and led a team of 15 risk professionals as the head of a credit portfolio management team at the Royal Bank of Scotland. Ms. Costello has published in the Journal of Educational Business and spoken at multiple industry conferences and roundtables in the finance and information services field. So we're very honored to have Ms. Costello with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I also want to read our land acknowledgement. Living Land Acknowledgement. SLA New York acknowledges the occupation of the unceded lands of Indigenous people and recognizes responsibility towards reconciliation, deconciliation, and allyship in physical and digital spaces. Digital Living Land Acknowledgement. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technology, structures, and way of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many Indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art we make leave significant carbon footprint, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous people worldwide. I invite you to join us in acknowledging all of this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this time, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, deconciliation, and allyship. So I would like to turn this over to Michelle, and you can take over. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm happy to be here today speaking to you about S&P Capital IQ. And we're going to explore today how this database is a dynamic tool that we can use as information professionals across many different industries and venues. So I'm going to start by just introducing this database a little bit. So Standard & Poor's describes Capital IQ as an integrated web-based platform for market intelligence. So what does that mean? It basically means that you have multiple databases under one roof for the purpose of combining different types of data and information sources for richer analytics. So we have global news, market analytics, counterparty analytics, fund analytics, industry research, powerful screening tools, people search capabilities that many competitors offer under separate products, all under one platform using a transparent and trusted source, which is the Standard & Poor's brand, as well as industry standard data streams found in the platform. So this is, speaking from experience, both in my corporate life as well as my academic life, it is certainly a very powerful tool that is used by finance industry professionals, but can be used for much wider research purposes as we do in academia in my current role. So just a few words again about this database. This was originally designed by investment bankers for investment bankers. So, what do we mean by that? We mean that information professionals have taken the perspective of the types of data and the types of data sets that would be most useful for client advisory on M&A, on debt structuring, and they've kind of taken that information and packaged it in a way that's most useful for finance professionals. However, we can also use this information, like I said, for many other applications like marketing or supply chain analysis at the corporate level. So I'm going to give today a kind of a brief overview, and then I'm going to get into some very specific examples on going into the database on how we might use and manipulate that data. So just a few more words about the scope of this platform, right? This platform contains literally millions of counterparties. So what do I mean by that? Well, we have over 60,000 public companies. We have corporates, financials. We have tens of thousands of funds. We have millions of private company profiles, all within this database. So this brings together, like I said, information you might find in public markets, information you might find in Dun & Bradstreet, all under one roof, making it very easy to perform, say, a market analysis or a peer group analysis, because all this data is in one place. We also have tools that we can use to analyze the global operating environment, the business environment, things like macro indicators, things like industry research reports. So we have information on public markets, indices, foreign exchange, interest rates, sovereign risk, peer groups, S&Ps, proprietary credit information, detailed equity and debt research and industry research reports, all within this database. And we also have global coverage. So I want to just highlight that before we get into some examples, so you understand kind of the breadth and scope of this database for your research purposes. So they have, again, thousands of companies profiled spanning Canada, Europe, Asia Pacific, Africa, Middle East, and Latin America as well. And I think I mentioned tens of thousands of mutual funds and ETFs also on this platform, right? And so some of the benefits, as you'll see when we get in there, are the streamlined interface with kind of intuitive menus and then links that bring you back to more detailed information. So you hyperlink back to source data, because transparency is one of the hallmarks of this database. And we also have a free text search bar to more easily discover data within the database. So, those are kind of some of the key benefits, as well as powerful screening tools. And I'll mention at the end some online training that they offer. So some of the limitations compared to other databases would be lack of depth in certain areas. And there are some ADA compliance issues with the interface that I will be discussing in a forthcoming article in the Charleston Advisor, as well as some clunky aspects of the interface, which have been greatly improved over the years, but there's still always room for improvement in terms of the user experience. So I'm going to, because we are the Special Libraries Association, I'm going to ground us in some of our basic library principles when we evaluate this database as we get started today. Specifically, I'm going to touch upon the Association of College and Research Libraries framework for information literacy, and highlight inquiry, authority, and scholarship aspects of this database. So here we have the definitions from the ACRL framework of those topics. But basically, this database is supporting our iterative research process and inquiry process by allowing the user to define the research question as they move through the data sources, and then redefine as they discover and continue to analyze different aspects of their research question. So for example, one might use screening or charting to discover data and then redefine their search question, or use different components of the company and peer group to adjust the scope of their inquiry and analysis, right? So also regarding authority, as I mentioned a moment ago, this database is firstly from a very reputable source within the industry, which is Standard & Poor's, a very well-respected name that's been in business for decades. Secondly, transparency is one of the hallmarks of this database in terms of audit capabilities and disclosure of source data. So as we move through, I'll highlight what you also see for yourself. Source data is disclosed right on the web pages, but we also, anytime we see a hyperlink that's in blue, can actually click through back to source documents. So examples might be annual reports or a bond prospectus, So you have the capability to go back to these source documents as well and see where this data is coming from. So thirdly, the database brings together thought leadership from Standard & Poor's in terms of quantitative research on the landing page, evaluating markets and techniques for evaluating markets. It also provides third-party research on equities and debt and industries, and brings you also back to primary documents like SEC filings and company transcripts from earnings calls. So when we think about the kind of a community of researchers and scholars engaged in this discourse, we're bringing together those different voices in this one platform. So I think it's really important to just highlight a couple of those points so we understand that we have trusted sources, varied perspectives, all offering different interpretations of the facts and events, all under this one platform as well in the Capital IQ portal. So, finally, I'm just pulling here from, I have the citations at the end. One of the information professionals commenting on information creation authority and value, which is Burkhart. And I'm going to specifically mention that because this was created by investment professionals for investment professionals, the bias of this database is very much around financial services ratios and analytics. And that expertise is demonstrated in terms of, what would be useful for an analyst or a fund manager to be looking at as on the buy side or the sell side, as they're kind of using this database, whether it be, for idea generation or client presentations or their own asset management process. But there are other dimensions of value that are described in this database as well. So this is a paid service. This is a subscription service that's not available for individual purchase. You have to purchase this as a kind of corporate subscription or an academic subscription. But the dimensions of value are really, again, consolidating data that you would pay for separately, all under one roof, and the time, the dynamism of moving back and forth through these different data sources, and saving that time, because time is money, in corporate and in financial capacities, right? So all that being said, this information can be very much used to influence markets, to influence investment decisions, to influence corporate strategy, to help you manage your supply chain. And then finally, because we are, again, the Special Libraries Association, as a community of scholars, I want to just share here proper citation and attribution method, which sometimes people are not clear about for this type of data source. So I have one example here. So those are just some key points to ground our discussion. Finally, one of the things that I will mention a couple times in the presentation, is how this can be used for competitive intelligence, for strategic actions, whether that be as a finance professional or whether that be as a corporate who's trying to best manage their segments in terms of, say, a Boston Consulting Group type matrix, where you look at the star performers or the underperformers in your segments within your business lines. So one of the tools I'm going to use and present here is, and be very deliberate about the way I define competitive intelligence, is the Ackoff framework, DIKW model. So basically, Russell Ackoff was a management consultant and former professor of management science at Wharton, who coined this terminology and this framework. So as we move through this database, we're going to see how different data points are consolidated for the purpose of building knowledge, the how and why a company or a fund is performing the way it is, how a certain industry is working, and then use that to get to this top pinnacle in terms of competitive intelligence, which is really, which we're calling the wisdom aspect of our framework here, right? So in other words, how do we take these data sources together, news items, third-party research, primary data, and how do we extrapolate, apply our judgment, and really generate meaning from these different data sets in terms of strategy, in terms of projections or outlooks for companies, for investment purposes, or strategic actions. So that's kind of why this database is important and where we're going today. I'm going to ask you guys to, I'm going to go through some demonstrations and hold questions till the end. We'll leave time for Q&A, and I would like to also invite people to drop questions in the chat as I'm speaking. So with no further ado, we're going to jump into the database itself. And the first thing we're going to talk about is peeling away layers of the onion in terms of the macro view. And then we're going to go into the industry view and then the counterparty specific view and look at some of the different tools for screening and charting as well. So let me briefly describe the macro view in Capital IQ, and then I'm going to demonstrate it in the database. So what we have here, as you can see, is our some screenshots of our landing page. So we have here market news. This is proprietary information that Standard & Poor's has consolidated in terms of, as I mentioned, their own research on how to analyze the market, as well as news feeds from third parties. You can customize. Again, I mentioned this is a dynamic tool. So you can use this little widget, which I'll show you when we get into the database in a moment as well, to customize your screen, your landing page, the way that you look at things. That's going to make this the most dynamic tool for your purposes. You can also create watch lists that appear on your homepage, so making this tool work for you. So you're going to have also some basic information on your landing page over here on world markets. So you can tap through there, US, global, FX, interest rates, commodities. You can kind of use that in that way. You can also go into the markets area, and you can go into specific data points in terms of analyzing the commodities, the rates, or even country risk. So we're going to demonstrate that now. So bear with me while I flip over to the Capital IQ product. Okay, so you should be seeing here on your screen now the interface that you'll be presented with when you log into Capital IQ. Being that this is a web-based platform, you are able to access this anywhere from different devices, mobile, computer. So that's, again, one of the key aspects versus some databases which require you to be at a specific type of terminal or interface. This is actually web-based. And as I move through the system, you can also download many aspects of these data sets into Word documents, PDF, Excel. So I'll also demonstrate that as we move throughout the database. So this is my landing page, my Capital IQ. This is where I started. And as I was just showing you a moment ago, you're going to have proprietary market analysis from Capital IQ here, market commentary, for example, what's happening with the S&P 500 and earnings, and then specific research reports, again, thinking about that scholarly conversation about, for example, how to use natural language processing analysis in credit rating actions to interpret, where markets are going, getting to that wisdom aspect of the DI-KW matrix, right? We also have here that market overview. So we have our world markets. I can go into rates, currencies, commodities at a glance here. The importance of this is that if you're a market participant, you want to be able to get a snapshot of your macro environment. The other area I wanted to highlight here is going to the Markets tab. So as you tab across here, you'll see Capital IQ, home landing page, which can be customized using this wheel here, Customize Capital IQ Views, your companies, your research, markets, screening, charting, etc. So we're going to go into markets here, again, looking at that macro view. So you have the opportunity to go into things like what's the macroeconomic environment. I'll just click through to some of these to show you what this looks like. So here we have our economic overview. world markets, macroeconomic summary. You can go into commodities overview, so different aspects of your operating environment. And if any of these are interesting, again, the hyperlinks throughout the system, you can click through to source data. So I could click on, I'll just pick something from the Chicago Board of Trade, corn here, right? So that the sources are disclosed in parentheses, and also at the bottom, the system will always tell you on these pages very transparently where they're getting this data, right? So those are some things about macroeconomics, GDP, unemployment, inflation, the overall macro environment, your commodities, that could be used for things like analyzing the volatility of if you're a corporation, of your margins, or looking at your supply chain, right? And then we can look at rates. Again, what's the overall kind of funding or fundraising environment? So you have the opportunity to look at, your base rates, like your treasury curve. You can get into things that are specific. Let me just try to move this menu out of the way here. There we go. You can get into things that are specific, like your corporate yield curves here. Just scrolling down on the left. Each of these tabs and areas will have more detailed links here over on the left. So let's say I'm interested in crossover credits, meaning companies that are between BBB and BB ratings. I could click here. I could see what those curves look like. I'm going to take out investment grade. You can also do investment grade and high yield to compare your investment grade would be BBB minus and above, and your high yield would be BB plus and below. So you could look at, the way different components of the market are performing in terms of yield, as well as we saw on the first page, what's going on with overall stock markets and indices, right? So we were living here in this markets tab for a few moments, looking at these. The next thing I'm going to highlight is going to be your industry analysis. So let me go back and say a few words about that.
Michelle, we have 2 questions if you want me.
Sure. I'm going to just quickly go back. I'm going to say something about industry analysis in terms of macro environment, and then we can go into questions, and then I'll go into company analysis. So I think that'll be a good way to manage our time and our flow. So just bear with me for 1 minute here. Okay, so the other way we look at our macro environment is through industry analysis, right? So within the system, we can go into those specific industries that we saw under the markets tab I was just showing you. We can also link to industries through specific companies. So I'll demonstrate that in a moment as well. But I just wanted to highlight the kind of industry information that could be really useful for things like a management or a marketing class. I often, wearing my academic hat, do direct people to the industry research reports in here to get to know an industry and to look at what are the industry drivers for market analysis outside of the finance industry. So this can be useful in academic as well as corporate applications, understanding your business environment. So they have proprietary research as well as peer group analysis within the system. And importantly, they use this finance industry standard, which is the GICS classification system, which is more granular than your SIC or your NAICS schemes, and it's also updated more frequently. And the Standard & Poor's classifications also provide codes where no SIC code exists. So in the asset management and custody banks area, for example. So in summary, it's a much more useful mechanism that's going to allow you to find better industry research and to source peer groups that are more relevant. So I'm going to actually drop into chat an article, an academic journal article that was written by my colleagues on this GICS topic. If you want to get into the weeds on that. And then I'm going to demonstrate here some of the aspects of the industry tools within the database. And I'm also going to drop into chat a training video on the industry analytics within this database. So let me just quickly demonstrate the industry aspects back in the database, and then we're going to pause for questions before we move on to counterparty analysis. Okay, so we're back in our markets tab, and here's where you can see various industries, right? So I can potentially find an industry I think is interesting. I'm just going to pick something here. What's great about this tool is it shows you different industries and different transactions, because this is for bankers, right, within industries like M&A or new issuances. But we also see here in terms of your top performers in the S&P versus bottom performers. You get some market, again, combining, what's happening with the industry and how we analyze it, and also dynamically what's happening in real time in markets for that industry. So I'm going to click on automotive and use that. So automobiles as one of my examples today. So we have here, because it is Standard & Poor's, the ratings composition of that particular industry. But it's also really interesting to look at who are the constituents in terms of that GICS classification within a particular industry. So I'm over here on the left-hand column, clicking on constituents, just taking a moment to load. We can also look up key statistics and ratios. So what are the types of information that I would want to find in this industry? So for example, in the airline industry, I'd be interested in revenue per seat mile. In the automotive industry, I'm interested in, my CapEx and my efficiency ratios. In pharmaceuticals, I'm interested in my R&D as a percentage of my revenue, right? So there are also things that are specific to each industry. So this is a list of constituents like your Tesla, your General Motors, your Ford. I can click through to any of these companies and I can get a profile. And so we'll go into company profiles in a moment. I just want to demonstrate the audit capability that you can click through to the source within any of these hyperlinks. Also, we importantly can be looking at industry and investment research in this area. So I'm just going to go under research here on the left-hand vertical menu and select industry surveys. So we're currently in automotive. So it's going to show me third-party research from CFRA. This was previously actually a Standard & Poor's research group that was sold to a third party. So I'm going to have very detailed reports here, which again are very useful. If you're new to the industry, you'll have an industry survey that describes how to analyze companies in the industry. What is the landscape? How do I do a Porter's 5 forces analysis? So this can be super useful, way beyond financial services. So I'm just going to demonstrate or click on one of these reports so you can see how detailed they are. That's going to open up in a child window here. So you can see here just from the table of contents, industry drivers, trends, porters, how the industry operates, how to analyze companies in this industry, industry references, comparable companies. So there's a real breadth of data in these, 50-page reports, for example, on the industry. So much wider application just beyond, say, financials. I also want to demonstrate the peer group analysis. So we just saw you can find peers within the industry surveys, but you can also find peers for a specific company to help understand your industry. So I'm going to pick Ford Motor. We just saw them on our list as an industry constituent. So I just went to companies and I typed in their name in the dynamic search bar, just taking a moment to load here. There it goes. So within a specific company, I can also access that same industry research by scrolling down in the vertical menu, going under research and locating industry surveys. And I can, if I want to understand the operating environment in terms of peer group and their performance across multiple types of financial and market metrics, I can go to peer analysis quick comps. So once I find a good constituent, I can get a peer group in terms of their financial performance, their trading multiples, their valuation, operating statistics, valuation, and credit profile. Right. So again, valuation is something that from the equity markets perspective, we may be more familiar with, but the credit health profile is something that is very specific to this database, being that Standard & Poor's is a rating agency and well-known in fixed income markets. They've used their proprietary tools to develop an operational solvency and liquidity matrix analysis here, as well as their own proprietary analytics around probability of default. So you can look at the profile of risk within an industry at a snapshot here using peer analysis, as well as at the company level. We'll revisit this in a few moments, but I just wanted to show you the power of using this in terms of looking at, what is the profitability within an industry in terms of operating statistics, what are the, enterprise value EBITDA multiples for strategic actions, whether you're at the corporate or the investment banking side, and also credit health in terms of evaluating risk or distressed debt investing or something like that within a particular industry. So we're going to, those are the key industry aspects I wanted to take a moment to show you. So we're going to just pause here. We're going to take some questions, and then I can jump back into counterparty level analysis.
So we have a question. We have two questions from Jennifer. Are there different page URLs stable so I can make them landing page for different audiences? That's one question.
So I think you're asking me if I was to go to a specific page, like for example, that industry research page within the system, could I copy that URL and share it to someone and they would arrive at that specific aspect of the database? The short answer is, I guess, yes. So let me demonstrate that by just dropping that into chat and see if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, she said yes.
Okay, terrific. So I'm going to drop into chat 2 industry examples, and you can see if you can access those. So I'm just dropping the comparable company analysis for 4 that we just looked at. So your 2 components there are your industry survey information in terms of those research reports. I just dropped that unique URL, and then I dropped the example of the peer group. So you can see what that looks like. And
she says she needs to log in, she can't check.
Right. So because it is, again, a database behind a paywall, right, you do need, a subscription or a unique login or authentication process through your company or academic institution to log into this database. But yes, you should be able to use unique URLs to get to very specific pages within the system. Before we leave industry information, I also wanted to drop in a follow-up training. So let me just go ahead and do that. So for people that want to take a deeper dive into industry tools, as I go through, I'll just put resources in the chat for you. So this is a link to a training video from Capital IQ going into some more details of how to conduct the industry research. Was there any other questions in chat?
Yeah, the other question is, how far back does the data go?
So there's decades of data, which is a great segue into my next tab, which is you have decades of financials data, decades of equity data for markets. If you want to go back and look at how the Standard & Poor's Index has performed for the last 50 years, you can do that. So, and there aren't limitations in terms of downloads. You can download and take this data with you in Excel, perform analytics, use it for very specific purposes, or manipulate it for presentations. So, you can definitely, so that was a great segue into my next point, which is that you have detailed company level analytics as well as decades of financial data, right? So certainly that's the case. Were there any other questions in chat that we should address?
No, it says those two. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, so thanks for that segue into company level or counterparty level analytics. When we think about, companies, financial institutions, funds, we're analyzing now specific counterparties or market participants, right? So the counterparty level analysis for investment research, valuation, capital structure optimization, if you're in, say, corporate treasury, as I mentioned, competitive intelligence, who are the new entrants in my space? How is my industry changing? How do I respond from kind of management strategy perspective? How do I conduct a supply chain analysis? When we looked at that, another way to use that credit health panel is to think about within your supply chain, who are the companies that are in the red zone? Who is struggling in terms of a kind of credit profile or might have a liquidity issue? You might lose that supplier, right? So there's lots of different ways to apply this beyond just financial markets, investment banking type of purposes. We can also apply this for academic purposes, right? In terms of if I'm in a corporate finance class, I can use the data in here to conduct a DuPont analysis, or I can look at capital spending and think about IRR or different tools to analyze a company's specific capital investment strategy, as well as, of course, your debt and equity structure evaluation. So we have, like I said, many applications here. I really like the segment analysis, which I'm going to demonstrate in a moment. It's very good for, say, microeconomics analysis. If I want to see how a company's segment has performed based on a specific strategy or event, I can look at that time series data again over a very specific course of time in response to an event, as well as look at decades to see how they perform during certain recessionary environments or how they responded to the COVID environment. So there's lots of different ways to kind of use that. Another way I like to use segments analysis is the Boston Consulting Group matrix for strategic business decisions, identifying your star performers in terms of growth and in terms of margins versus your underperformers for divestment within your portfolio. And all of this analysis that you find in terms of financials is supported by the Library of Public Filings, tailored news feeds, investment research reports to support your analysis. So we're going to just kind of live in counterparty analysis for a moment. I'm also going to demonstrate to you the transparent links throughout the system. So I have here in this slide an example of the PE ratio, but I'll show you some other ones that take you back to the source public filings or say prospectuses for debt offerings or equity offerings. So transparency and data disclosure is really emphasized through the audit capability within the system. And then, for private companies, we have less information, but this is very useful for comparable supply chain idea generation in our screening. So we really, for example, you might want to be looking at, who's in your supply chain that's a private company. Well, you still have some basic data on that. Particularly if they have public debt, you're going to have more information. And then we'll do some other functions like executive search and fund analytics and screening briefly at the end. So let's jump into our counterparty analysis. And we'll kind of move through those screens I just mentioned. Okay, so I've clicked on the companies tab here, and I'm just going to go back to that example of Ford Motor Company. I'm just going to briefly demonstrate, again, some of the powerful things we can do here in this tool. So it's just taking a moment to pull that up. So you're going to be presented here with what we call a tear sheet as your landing page. So this is where you can go directly, if you want, into the industry classification components, that GICS classification, and you can go into your industry research directly from here to analyze your operating environment. You have the specific links here to the source documents, as well as on any of these pages, information on the sources for the data, such as ICE or S&P. Okay, so what are the kind of information you can find here? Company description, some information about performance. So as mentioned a moment ago, I'm just going to demonstrate the transparency of the data. So let's say I'm interested in how they got to this valuation, like my PE or my enterprise value EBITDA multiples. I can click on the source document, the source data, link here, the blue hyperlink. It'll bring me back to source documents. All right, so where do I find this information? Let's go back to enterprise value EBITDA now. So that audit capability is very useful. So let's say I'm in enterprise value EBITDA. EBITDA is a definition that's not industry standard, right? It's defined, some people might want to include different aspects like one-time charges or not include them. So you have the ability to see how they've calculated these standardized ratios, and then whether or not you want to include or not include things, and then click back to source documents like annual reports here. And it'll take you to the instances of that particular, say, I clicked on revenue. It'll take you to, by highlighting the instances where that's located, say, for example, in the financial statements, in the management discussion and analysis, the note on revenue. So this audit capability is really terrific. I'm just going to point out some of the things I mentioned verbally over here. So we have the segment analysis under financials and valuation. So this is where you can look at, Ford is maybe not the best example for segments. Let's do Procter & Gamble for a second. So again, you can search by ticker or company name. So this is a good one. You can see here, what's the revenue by segment? How is grooming performing with the entrance of Dollar Shave Club compared to, say, baby? Their diaper business might be thriving or growing or stable. So it helps you understand the specific aspects of the performance there. And as the question came up, you can go back decades here by using this bar and introducing historical performance through different business cycles and through different economic or strategic events the company has faced. And you can download and take that data with you in Excel. I'm going to just reduce the time frame here for ease of use. You can take that stuff with you by using the download functions here, download financials. A couple of other key components I want to mention here are you can get into the detailed financial statements, going through income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, et cetera. But you can also look at key ratios, again, by industry and by things like your working capital management, if you're in the corporate treasury, things like your DuPont analysis for strategic actions. All of these different components are here, and again, can go back decades to look at how they perform during specific events or time periods. Finally, you can get into a really good summary in terms of their capital structure evaluation using fixed income. You can get into their debt maturity profiles, just taking a moment to load. You can get into, here we go, your credit ratios, your debt maturity profile, specific issuances. So I'm just going to kind of click on one of these. And then you can even get back to source documents in terms of the offering documents, as well as the terms. In this case, it's not available, but sometimes you can click through to the source documents. The other thing I wanted to mention here is you can link to other aspects like charting within this system, or you can go to it separately in the tabs above. So I'll show that separately in the tabs above in a moment. You can get into proprietary news feed based on what's going on with this company. I think it's really useful to use the screening tools within transcripts So now I'm within Procter & Gamble's transcripts. I might be interested in restructuring. So I'm going to type in the free text keywords here. I'm going to search for restructuring events within the transcripts. And I'm going to be taken to discussions on that. I might also look at, say, acquisitions, divestitures, or other key events. And you can also get into company-specific research. We looked at industry. Here's company-specific research. So I can click on research reports here, describing equity research. So this will also have presentation of current view as well as projected financials in terms of the valuation. And finally, going back to tear sheet, you can really use this, as I mentioned a moment ago, for people screening. So let's say I'm interested in more information on the CEO. I can go to key professionals. I can get a tear sheet about this person's profile. I could look at their relationship tree, see what other companies they're involved in, what executives they're involved with. So this could be useful for kind of management and strategic purposes as well. I just want to link to charting now, and then we'll do screening in a moment. So I was looking at, say, Ford or Procter & Gamble. So I'm just going to click on one of those. And you can use the charting function here to look at things like how their equity is performing. So here's just a quick price volume chart. But I can also layer on here specific events. So I can annotate company announcements, activist investors, other things, right? So now if I click on one of those and layer that on, now in my chart, I'll see these different things. So here's how the company responded in terms of their share price to an upgrade by Standard & Poor's from BBB minus, so from WB plus to BBB minus, moving from non-investment grade to investment grade. We see a positive response here. So that's a way you can use news events. You can also, again, go back decades in terms of their performance, to speaking to the prior question on the financials here. And you can download this data and take it with you.
Michelle, does the data go back to the 70s or like earlier? Like
For stock, I think you go back into the 60s. I'm looking for max here. This goes back into, looks like 1969, 68, right? You can go back here, right? And in terms of financials, it's literally decades. You can kind of play around with it to see how you do that. I'm going to take questions again at the end in a moment. I just wanted to finish really quickly the counterparty level analysis, quickly demonstrate a private company and a fund, which will just take really a moment. I just showed you executive search, and I want to quickly show a screening example. So going back to companies, you can also look up, say, financial institutions. I could do, JP Morgan or something. I'm going to demonstrate here a private company, Koch Industries. They have public debt, so we do have a little bit more data. It's just taking a moment to load here. So again, you have a similar tear sheet with, company description, some kind of basic logistical information, executive profile, some strategic actions in terms of, say, acquisition, divestiture, latest news developments, and your credit ratings here for because they have a public debt, so they have a third-party credit rating from Standard & Poor's. But you can see here you have much less detailed information in terms of their financial analytics, but you still have a good fixed income summary because they have public debt. And you still have the ability to click through to industry and peer analysis. I'm just going to quickly show you that so you can just see the power of having all this data in one place. So you can go back to your industry surveys in terms of your research, linking back to, say, the different components like chemical industry for Koch Industries. This does take you to the markets tab. So this is one of those clunky aspects where once you link to another tab, you can just use the arrows on the upper left to get back to companies tab, or you can click on the companies tab in the upper horizontal menu to get back to where you were. set your research, your SE filings pertaining to debt, your fixed income summary, and then you can your peer group, your quick comps. So even for private companies, you can do a lot of detailed analysis here. So I just wanted to kind of compare, contrast public-private companies in here. And then I'm going to show you an example of a fund. And the type of information you're presented with here. So in summary here, you have the list of those funds. You can use again a simple function to look at the portfolio manager operations. You have going to be starting the embedded chart here, as well as going to the starting tab to go to the details, the chart you just pop out, you download it here. And if I want to compare, this is the performance the first thing the S&P 500, right? So this is a really useful function and the details I mentioned ago. So we just we put the example and the final thing I'm going to do is just briefly demonstrate Syria, which is one of the really powerful database.
Michelle.
You can use other debt streams like the screening, the income screening, investment banking, or the information screening. So we're going to go to each screener to demonstrate what the screening is. You can also take a few screening. Again, that's in this aspect. If you're not something you know, you're going to be looking for all the screening for that. You can demonstrate
Michelle, I'm not, we can't hear you that well. Yeah, something's wrong.
All of the other components, you just put them on the go in the United States, only, market cap greater than 10 billion, I think about it. I'm interested in revenue.
Michelle, can you hear me?
This is the results. Another way to get a peer analysis, there's also a way to maybe think about, I'm looking at suppliers, so I'm doing the supplier base. This particular moment was validating to that, I'm just going to drop the research.
Michelle, can you hear me? I don't know if she can.
I'm going to drop on two tutorials on training. That's really nice and useful because it's a great detail. This video is on training. And something that comes up that this is a this positive is training for that. So I'm going to talk about it. And I think people have to use it and consider a training for that in the future. Here's the results of our screen. Now we have our report book. Then if we keep going, we can type in the report. Give you an idea of and anything we see that for the day, it means people to target mid-cap or high-cap. I'm going to give it a time. Now, just say, banking space, I'm interested in companies with revenue products or how that we can make definitions and I think that market is a product. So
Michelle, can you hear me? I'm sure she can.
Okay, I'm not sure. There seems to be a
Oh.
problem with the,
Yeah, now it's a
what
lot
I would
better.
hear me now. Someone give me a show of hands.
Yeah, it's a lot better now.
Okay, it seems like you guys lost me for a few minutes there. I just want to see if you guys can hear me now.
Yeah, Michelle, we can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can someone just drop into chat if you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry we lost the audio there, but I'll just kind of recap what I had said, which is basically, again, in screening and charting, I was just doing a basic screen to show you that the purpose-built, pre-built screens can save you a lot of time. And that I gave two examples, which they can be used for screening idea generation. If you're, say, on the banking side, you may define your target market for middle market by revenue. So you can look at companies that are potential target clients for you to sell products and services to by screening, by company, by size. And you can click through those dynamic links, those blue hyperlinks, back to company descriptions and detailed company data and that audit capability throughout the system. The other thing you can do in screening is say, look for suppliers. You want suppliers with a certain scale and scope, so you feel confident they'll be in business. And as a corporate manager, you can think about, how do I broaden my supply chain in that way? You can also use screening for international targets for M&A, something like that, in the investment banking side. So I was just briefly mentioning some aspects of screening there. And I dropped into chat some of the specific trainings on that. And the final one I dropped in was screening for job purposes. Capital IQ had created a really interesting training on screening for jobs of the future. So I just dropped that into chat. So apologize for that technical issue. Not quite sure what happened there. But again, thanks for bearing with me. So finally, I want to leave you with this link on additional training resources. S&P has created some training resources for you all to get into a deeper dive on some of the stuff I went over today. So I want to, leave you with this link. I'll also pop it into chat.
Michelle, this was wonderful. Thank you so much.
And in the time that we have here, take a few questions. My contact information is here. Thank you so much for your attention today. I have my LinkedIn, happy to connect with people on LinkedIn as well as an email. And I have a list of references for some of the things I referenced as I discussed today in the presentation here. So I'll leave my contact information up in case people want to take that down. I'm also going to drop that into chat. And I see there are some questions in chat that we can address.
Michelle, can you hear me? I'm not sure if you can.